Hello and welcome to the New Book of Daniel podcast. My name is Daniel Bobinski and I will be your host on this St. Patrick's Day adventure. Today is the 17th of March, the year 2021. And there's all sorts of fun stuff in the news. We're going to take a look at it from a Patriot's perspective. In other words, we're not going to be putting a Marxist spin on things to deceive you. One of the things that's in the news, in case you haven't noticed, is Mr. Ammon Bundy. We'll talk a little bit about his situation. We're going to talk about my latest column at uncoverdc.com, the 5 strategies for our new civil war. We'll talk a little bit about gun control laws. We'll talk a little bit about money laundering in Idaho. Yes, it's happening. And the California governor has said that we're not going to go back to normal because normal means inequity, whatever that means. We'll talk about that. Before I get jumping in, I want to let you know we have this new thing happening. You can go in the show notes down below after this thing gets published and you're watching it on rewind or replay, whatever, rerun, whatever term you want to use. You'll be able to see a link down there that lets you know how to get one of these coffee mugs, the New Book of Daniel coffee mug. And you can just, they're not expensive, and we make a couple of bucks on them, and just a little something fun that you can let people know that you can support the podcast. Anyways, New Book of Daniel mugs. Happy St. Patrick's Day. I am wearing my green today. I have my green frogs, toads actually. This tie was a gift to me, at least probably 20 years ago. So you see that there's a book behind me called Removing Obstacles to Success. That book was originally titled Living Toad Free, and it was written by Dr. Dennis Rader and myself. Has to do with a kind of a fresh way of looking at motivation. A very unique way of looking at how people are motivated, what gets in the way of motivation. And it's a fun, fast, easy read. Unfortunately, Dr. Rader passed away a few years after we wrote that book, but he did buy me this tie with the toads on it, and I wear it on St. Patrick's Day to honor Dennis and show my green, so that I'm wearing my green on St. Patrick's Day. All right, let's get into the news. Let's talk a little bit what happened in Boise, Idaho, with Mr. Ammon Bundy. You know Ammon as the guy who was down there in Nevada helping his dad defend his land from, by the way, these cups come in a nice box. So when you order the cup, it comes in a nice big box, keeping it safe. Ammon Bundy was in the news in Boise. He was showing up to his trial because he was arrested at the Capitol this past summer. And so his trial is now up. He requested a jury trial, and he has to show up to that jury trial. So he shows up at the Ada County Courthouse here in Idaho, and he's not wearing a mask because, like me, he doesn't wear masks for any reason at any time. And he was met at the door with the Ada County sheriffs and the marshals there at the courthouse, and they wouldn't let him in. And what you're seeing in the news right now is saying that Ammon Bundy refused to appear, that he chose to stand out in front of the courthouse and protest the wearing of masks. That is not the case. That's a total Marxist spin, but yet that's what you're seeing in the news. What happened was he showed up. He tried to go into his trial. They would not let him in. So they're calling that he refused to go in, when he did not refuse to go in. They refused to let him in. And if they want to call what he did out there on the steps a protest, he was not protesting in the sense that you would normally think of a protest. He was simply saying, I'm not going to wear the mask. I do not have an illness. I am of no danger to anybody. And I'm going to go into my trial. They wouldn't let him in. And so they arrested him, and several other people as well. People who tried to, I think, erroneously tried to prevent him from being arrested. One person was actually charged with felony assault on a police officer. Bad move. If someone's going to arrest you, if they're going to make the arrest, don't fight the arrest, because then you get charged with resisting arrest. or in this case, you get charged with felony battery on a police officer. So you don't want those kind of things on your record. But if you're just, like Ammon said, when they came out and said that they're going to arrest him, he openly said, and I watched the video, and you can watch it online for yourself. He openly said, "I will not assist you in this." What he means is that he's not even going to walk. If they put the cuffs on him, they have to carry him because he's not even going to help them because it's an illegal arrest. By the way, just to let you know, every time that Ammon Bundy has been arrested for something and held in jail, they put him in solitary confinement. They try to beat him down emotionally. He's been let off. The court, every time he's gone before a judge for a case, they've always found in his favor. So he's operating constitutionally. He's drawing a hard line. Do I agree with the actions that Ammon takes some of the time? No, but some of the times I do. And when he does stand for principled conservative action, principled constitutional action, I'm behind him 100%. Anybody should be who stands for the Constitution. We should not be arrested for sitting in a chair, right? It's kind of crazy. So 2 charges. He had 2 quote unquote trespassing charges against him at the State House. One of those was already dismissed. This one that he was attending his trial yesterday was supposed to be for the second trespassing trial. And I'm imagining it's going to get dismissed as well. But you got this big show, and now it's a big thing on media. And now one guy was taken to the hospital. A guy that I know was taken to the hospital because of the altercations that were taking place. If they're going to arrest you, let them, but don't help them. I kind of agree with Ammon. There's no reason for them to participate in this unconstitutional act. Now, what I think is the unfolding story here is that the last time Ammon was taken to the county jail, and this maybe it's even the Boise jail, I'm not sure which one he was taken to, but he was talking about how the state police there refused to give him a blanket, they refused to give him a pillow, and they turned on the air conditioner, so it was freezing cold in his cell with no blanket, no pillow, no place to lay down and get warm, no place to get warm, no place to sleep. And very, very, you think of cruel and unusual punishment. That's it. They were doing the same thing this past week, yesterday, the day before yesterday, when he did this at the courthouse, to both people who got arrested. They took off their shoes and socks. They wouldn't let them keep a coat. They wouldn't give them a blanket. They wouldn't give them a pillow. And they turned on the AC. And this is, you can't sleep. You can't. It's too cold. It's uncomfortable. I would expect that kind of action in North Vietnam during the war. I would expect that kind of action from Communist Chinese Party or maybe a Soviet gulag. I do not expect that kind of action from anybody in Idaho who serves the law, who wears a badge and represents the law. I think that is unconstitutional as all get out. And actually, I'm meeting with an attorney later today to discuss this very issue. That are these unconstitutional actions that our police are taking against these prisoners to cause them such pain and discomfort? Is this, in fact, cruel and unusual punishment? I would say that it is. I'll be meeting with a constitutional lawyer later today to discuss this. Anyways, when you see this in the news, you're going to see that Ammon Bundy refused to go in, that he chose to stand out in front of the courthouse and protest. None of that is true. The true Idaho news here is that Ammon Bundy tried to go in and they refused him. All right, let me talk now about what's going on in the country with regard to our, shall we say, our civil war, because that's what it is. This is a civil war that we're facing. And it's a civil war. Bullets aren't flying, nor should they be, nor should anyone want them to be. But we have a war going on, and unless patriots step up, we're going to lose this war. And I mean that. We have too many patriots who believe that if we just let everybody else be them and let us be us, then everything will go back to normal, and the people on the left will just go back to being the people on the left, and they can do their leftist stuff, and we can be living our lives the way we want. That's not going to happen. The left is marching on, and they are trying to take out everybody who's a patriot. If you watch only the headline news on network TV or cable news, you are not getting this story. You're not getting the fact, you're not hearing the fact that they are canceling so many people on the right, the patriots. They're taking away their ability to have bank accounts. They're taking away their ability to receive payment. They're taking away their products from stores so their products can't be sold. Anybody who's a spokesperson for the patriots is being canceled. People have been removed from social media platforms. You can't talk about certain things on social media. As a matter of fact, this podcast, the topics that I have chosen for this podcast are what I would call middle of the road stories. I have some hard-hitting news that I want to share with you, but I will not share it on this platform because this platform, YouTube, that I'm currently broadcasting on, will take off the piece. They'll take off the podcast, and they'll give me another strike. When I say another, I've already had one. I was quoting General Michael Flynn and talking about what he was discussing with regard to the events of November 3rd. I have to be judicious in even how I discuss this, because they say if you violate our community standards again, we will prevent you from uploading any videos for a week. And if you get a third strike, we just dump your channel. So why would I do that? I still can reach some people here and discuss what I would call middleweight news. For the heavyweight news, for the hard-hitting stuff, you're going to want to go over to CloutHub and get an account over at CloutHub, because the new Book of Daniel podcast will be starting in the next few weeks over at CloutHub. It'll be channel 161, the new Book of Daniel. And you have to apply to get a channel over there, which I did. And Jeff Brain is the CEO of CloutHub. Very gracious man, very neat guy. He's invested millions of his own money to make CloutHub a place for free speech. And you got live.brighteon.com is a place that's doing that. You've got CloutHub that's doing that, several venues. I'm going to be over at CloutHub for several reasons. But you can go over there and get an account, and you can, when you want to hear me talk about hard-hitting news, that's going to be the place to go. Anyways, I'm talking about this civil war. This is a column over at uncoverdc.com, and I would encourage you to go there. So there's 5 things, and this is first column in a 2-part series on our civil war. This is 5 strategies that we need to set up to defend America. The first is just to acknowledge that we're at a war. Like I said earlier, if we have people who are just hoping that there's going to be a draw, that the left will just be the left and the right can be the right, then we're going to lose. The left will run us over and they will win the war. No doubt in my mind. And I talk with other people and they are in agreement. We have to start changing our perspective. So let's talk about this for a second. When you say we're in a war, Daniel, what do you mean? Well, think back to the Revolutionary War. Think back to King George, who was very, shall we say, aggressively passive-aggressive towards the colonies, instituting all sorts of things that were suppressing the freedom of people. And you can, if you want to know what those were, just go look at the Declaration of Independence, because the founders listed the grievances against King George there. But you can go through that list. We went through that list in a class the other day, and over half of the 27 grievances against King George are being done even to us here today in Idaho, in red state Idaho, by our governor and also by the federal government. They are doing the same things that King George did to the colonies. Think about that. We have come full circle to our government has become that which they fought against in the Revolutionary War. We are in a civil war against the Marxists, and the Marxists have infiltrated our education system, our government, our law schools, our entertainment, and even our churches. And we have Marxist ideology permeating society right now. One of my stories coming up here talks about that. We had British officers in the Revolutionary War paying the Indians to attack outskirt settlements and scalp people, which they did. And they're being paid by the British. Well, look what's happening today. We have Antifa and BLM breaking into stores, looting stores, even murdering people. And they're being let out of prison by Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, who back in 2020, before they were installed as into the White House, they were raising bail funds. In this article, I actually link to Kamala Harris raising funds to get people out of jail who were causing all the horrific stuff in Minneapolis. So it's no different than the Revolutionary War. We have to realize we are in a war. So one of the techniques that we have to follow is to stop funding the enemy. Think about this. Think the World War II for a second. If you were in Britain and you needed ball bearings to manufacture stuff for the war effort, you wouldn't go over to look at a company in Germany and say, hey, can we buy some ball bearings from you so we can make this stuff? You wouldn't do that, because that would be profit to the enemy, and they would use that money to enhance their fighting against you. Well, the same thing is happening here in America today. It's just not as violent, right? It's a aggressively passive-aggressive civil war. So we have people like you and me you're very used to convenience and habit and cheap prices. And so we go to Amazon and we go to Walmart. We go to all these places that we're accustomed to shopping to. We think it's no big deal. We're just buying a couple of things. You are still funding the enemy because you're sending money, the profits, to go to those companies who are then using that money to cancel conservatives and patriots. Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post. The Washington Post could easily be retitled the Washington Pravda because they are so far left-wing. They could be a communist paper in Russia and be well accepted. They are anti-US Constitution. If you doubt me, go read it. Look at it. So we need to start building a patriot economy. We need to stop funding the enemy, and we need to find places that support patriots and start doing business there. Yes, it's going to be inconvenient. Yes, we'll spend a few more dollars. Yes, we need to establish new habits. But we're in a war, a civil war, a non-shooting, thank God, civil war, and nobody should want it to be. I'm going to underscore that multiple times so nobody accuses Daniel Bobinski of saying we should be in a hostile war. Never are you hearing me say that. We have, however, a very aggressively passive-aggressive civil war going on. And unless we wage it and fight using similar techniques, they are going to win. Number 3 on this list is to stop apologizing. Stop saying we're sorry for stuff. Remember, I'm going to go back to Mike Gundy, who was the head football coach at Oklahoma, when he was on a picture of him wearing an OAN shirt, One American News. And some running back on his football team imagined he was offended and made a big deal out of it. And then Mike Gundy gets out and apologizes and blah, blah, blah. And then, so here's the guy, this is the running back talking to CBS Sports. He says, it's not over. Don't get it twisted. Foot's still on the gas. In other words, we're not letting up. We're going to keep going and going. When you don't apologize, it strengthens you. There's no reason to apologize for a principled action, for something that's not offending anybody. Wearing an OAN shirt is not offensive. I don't see Kathy Griffin apologizing for holding up a head that looks like a bloodied head of Donald Trump. I don't see her apologizing for that. That was quite offensive, and yet she doesn't apologize. And nobody on the left is apologizing or demanding that she should. See what I'm saying? The left is very offensive, and yet they never apologize. But they know that patriots want to be perceived as being nice and polite. And we'll talk about that in a second. That's my next step. But stop apologizing. Look what happens when you don't apologize. Remember back in 2012, when Dan Cathy, who's the CEO of Chick-fil-A, when he said, I believe marriage is between a man and a woman. Well, the LGBTQWERT group came out and said, oh, we're so offended. We're so offended. He stood his ground. He said, I'm not apologizing for my viewpoint. And so we're going to have this big boycott. Well, the Patriots came out in force, and Chick-fil-A's business boomed. You couldn't get lunch. You're waiting in line. They're very good about getting people through their lines, but the lines were long. Their business boomed. Well, then what happens? Back in 2019, let's see, Chick-fil-A started funding. They got some money on their board, and they said, oh, well, let's go ahead and start funding some LGBTQWERT groups. And what do we know? Is that going to appease them? No, they said it's not enough. They came out, and the people on the left, the Marxists, said, oh, he needs to do more. He needs to do more. He needs to stop doing this. You give them an inch, they expect a mile, and the inch is not good enough. Doesn't matter. Stop apologizing. And then what happens? You got just last year, Dan Cathy, with all this imagined racist stuff that came out. He said he gets on TV and he polishes some black guy's shoes. Christians need to repent, and they need to polish black people's shoes. Again, why? For what purpose? Because the left goes, not good enough. And then you have patriots who go, you know what? He's wishy-washy on his principles. This is not a principled decision. This is virtue signaling. So let's just go buy lunch somewhere else. And I know people who don't eat at Chick-fil-A anymore because of that. This is very simple. Stop apologizing. If you say something that's principled, stick with it. Number 4, I alluded to this. Stop trying to be nice. Be good instead. That's the key. Stop trying to be nice. Be good instead. People conflate being nice with being good. Marxists don't care about being nice. And they see good as anything promoting Marxism. So you don't want to be doing that. You need to be we patriots need to be standing up for patriotic principles and stop caring about being nice. Marxists look at anything that's not Marxist and say, well, that's evil, and they want to get rid of it. We need to adapt the same tactic and say, you know what, the Constitution and the principles upon which our country were founded, those are good. And we're going to defend that, and we're not going to apologize for it, and we're not going to be nice about it. That doesn't mean you may have to be rude. Don't get me wrong. Don't misunderstand. We don't have to be rude about things, but we don't have to worry about being nice. Jesus was very good, but he wasn't always nice. The Pharisees were the leaders of the day in their community, and Jesus calls them whitewashed tombs and brood of vipers. Was that nice? Not exactly. And yet, Jesus was still very good. So you don't stop worrying about being nice. The leftists, they take advantage of that because a lot of patriots believe that you have to be nice. You just be principled, and if it comes across offensive to somebody, so what? Be principled. Here in Idaho, some legislator got on the floor and made some speech about moms are the best parents and they shouldn't be sending off their kids to preschool just because there's money for preschool. Moms, it's best if moms can. And that's very true. That's very true. Statistics back that up. But there's a bill that came through, some $6 million grant that's going to provide for free preschool for these kids that are 0 through 4. And the people who own the company are Marxists. What kind of ideology do you think is going to trickle down into those classrooms? We had legislators who actually believed, well, that Marxist ideology, that wouldn't happen here in Idaho. Bullpucky. That's what I say. It's deception. They're going to be taking every passive aggressive tack they can. Well, this guy got up and he said, we shouldn't even. He didn't have to even give this speech, but he did. He's a freshman. He wanted to make a speech on the floor. Well, his wife and him just got slammed with emails, personal emails, phone calls. And he got up the next day in the State House and he apologized. And what did the left do? They continued to go after him. They smelled blood. They said, okay, we injured him. Let's keep going. Don't apologize. It would have been much better for this guy to stand up and say, you know what? I don't disavow anything that I said yesterday. And it's really sad that people misunderstood my words. Let me clarify and stand his ground. That's what should have happened. When I talked with some of the legislators who observed him making this apology, they were aghast. And they said, well, he's a freshman and he's going to make mistakes. And lo and behold, he did. Last one here. And again, you can find this article, all these things I'm talking about here, you can find at uncoverdc.com. My article is the 5 strategies for our Civil War. Number 5, stop giving away our rights. Nobody takes away our rights. We simply abdicate them. Like with the masks. There's no law. That's why people who are being arrested for not wearing masks, when they take it to court, they are winning. They are winning. I want to go to the guy who is the barber in Michigan, who, when Governor Whitmer there said that he had to stop cutting hair, he went, the guy's 77 years old. He's got to make a living. That's what he does. He cuts hair. And so he opened up his barber shop, and they cited him. He kept cutting hair. They cited him again. They kept cutting hair. He kept cutting hair. They pulled his license to cut hair. He still cut hair. And so they issued a mandate that the man be arrested. Well, guess what? When the sheriff showed up, there was a whole bunch of patriots around the man's building that were not going to let the cops in. And the sheriff just said, you know what? This is not worth it. We don't have the manpower to enforce these illegal, unconstitutional edicts. And so we're not going to enforce these mask mandates and these unconstitutional orders that the governor is giving. So he didn't get arrested. And when he went to court, the case was dismissed because the court agreed that the governor's rules were unconstitutional. So I'm saying they're not taking away our rights. They're trying to. They make it look like they have the authority to do so. But in essence, we, patriots, are just giving them up. And so we need to stop giving away our rights. Now, I started this podcast talking about Ammon Bundy and how he's been arrested. It's kind of a lightning rod for issues. I get that. He's been thrown in jail. I get that. It's been uncomfortable, very much so. We're talking about that. We will be talking about that. But he also keeps getting let off because the courts find him, there's no cause to convict him. All they're trying to do with people like Ammon Bundy is make examples of them to try to put everybody else under their thumb, under their control. It is a war that they are winning in a very aggressive, passive-aggressive manner. I'm just going to close out this particular segment by saying that unless we adopt this mindset that we have to fight back, not with bullets, but being proactively assertive in things, then we are going to lose. The Marxists will take over, and America as we know it will be gone. This is not just an idle comment. This is not just for ratings or whatever. This is a true belief that I hold, and others that I know have the same belief. If we do not do something, the Marxists will take over, and America as we have known, a constitutional America, will be gone. Now, I'm going to be working on a second piece, a follow-up piece with things to be doing to take back some of the ground that we've lost. And that can be done. Back in the early 80s, when I was in the Navy, I read a book called Success, the Glenn Bland Method. Easy, quick, fast book. And one of the lines that I always remember from that book is, nobody can stop a man with a plan because no man has a plan to stop him. Well, guess what? We're going to be laying out a plan to stop them. The Marxists have a plan. They're enacting that plan. They're following Lenin's playbook beautifully. We are going to be developing a plan and publicizing that plan in the next article. And it's not going to be exhaustive, but it'll certainly be some steps that you can take to push back and take ground back on a principled method, not doing anything illegal, I'm not about protesting. I'm not about breaking glass and starting fires and everything that the left does. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about doing things principled, legally. And let me just close this piece by saying this. You know, Obama has an ego the size of a continent. The dude's got a huge ego. Why do you think he was a community organizer for so many years? Because he knows, and he knew then, that's where the power is, in community grassroots efforts. That's where it's going to start. My next topic here has to do just a brief comment to follow up, and I'm kind of underscoring my column. Former Congressman Ron Paul wrote a short piece that he compared Biden to King George. He says our founders today, if our founders were alive today, they would think that King George was benevolent compared to Biden. He goes through and says that here Biden's going to let us meet, that if we do what he says, and then maybe we can, these weddings and birthdays and graduations and family reunions were all, that the virus took all those out. No, the virus didn't take those out. The government took those out. And I place some of this blame at the feet of Donald Trump for letting it happen. He was following the advice of Mike Pence, whom I now believe to be a deep state traitor to the Constitution. But he was following the advice of his people. And as we're seeing, even Jared Kushner, I'll talk about here in a bit, Trump had surrounded himself with some people who were not following the U.S. Constitution. If and when Trump ends up back in office, he needs to be cutthroat about allowing only patriots on his staff. He'll need to gut the federal government and be ruthless about it in a very assertively way, a very assertive, proactive way. I love this. Representative Thomas Massey from Kentucky tweeted after Joe Biden's speech. He says, quote, "If you're waiting for permission from the chief executive to celebrate Independence Day with your family, you clearly don't grasp the concept of independence." I would agree with that. All right, let's move on. Talk a little bit about these gun control laws that are coming up. Wendy Struck Mahoney, also at Uncover DC, did a piece yesterday, on the new gun control laws. If you want to go read that, it's a very informative piece with lots of links so you can follow the trail, see all the data. These are bills that are going to make it darn near impossible to buy or transfer a gun. Even if you want to loan somebody a gun, you're going to need to get permission to do this if these laws pass. And they're talking about like on farms when they use guns to get rid of vermin out there in the fields eating up the crops. So if you're going to loan somebody a gun, you would need to, if you own the gun and somebody else is going to be borrowing the gun, you'll need to drive down to some place and file some paperwork that you're loaning the gun to somebody else. And then when they give it back, you have to go back and do the same thing. Well, some of these farms are in the middle of nowhere. So we're talking about a couple hours of driving to go transfer a firearm just so person can shoot vermin out in the fields. This is asinine. And if you ask me, it is a clear violation of our Second Amendment rights. These are rights. The Constitution does not give us the right to bear arms. It just acknowledges the fact that we have the right. So all sorts of things coming down the pike with regard to these gun laws. You'll want to take a look at this bill and don't know. All we need is one Democrat senator to say no. We have this 50-50 split thanks to the lies of the media and the Georgia people. We have 2 Georgia Democrat senators, which gave the House a 50-50 run. And of course, Kamala Harris, being the vice president, she can cast a tie-breaking vote, and she's very anti-gun because she's major league virtue signaler. But you won't be able to do this if this passes. You won't be able to even lend somebody a gun. So please contact your Democrat senators if you have them, and tell them, please represent the will of the state, not the will of Chuck Schumer. This is why we need to kind of repeal the 17th Amendment and get the states' legislators being the people who select who our senators are going to be, how it used to be before 1913, when they made the election of our senators popular vote. So anyways, that's different story, different column. Interestingly enough, in Idaho, State Senator Christy Zito has put forth a bill to make it so that that our law enforcement officers don't have to enforce these stupid federal gun laws. So that if anybody comes down to try to say, hey, you can't do this, there would be no crime against the police officer or the law enforcement officer for not enforcing the federal law. So our sheriffs and our police people can say, yeah, you know what? I'm not going to enforce that unconstitutional federal law. Hopefully, and what's interestingly enough is we have a senator, Patty Ann Lodge, who runs State Affairs Committee on the Senate side of the Idaho House. She's refusing to even consider the bill. Imagine that. A Republican, Patty Ann Lodge, out of Caldwell, Idaho, or Nampa, one of those two towns out west of Boise. District 11. She is saying no, she doesn't even want to hear it. She doesn't even want that to be considered in Idaho. What's up with this? This is Idaho, Senator. So Senator Christy Zito had to take the bill to the House and get somebody to listen to it in the House. So it's going to go through the House. It'll pass. And then it'll go to the Senate, and we'll see what happens there. So some pressure needs to be applied to Senator Patty Ann Lodge to realize this is a constitutional republic, not a dictatorship. We don't elect you to be a dictator. We elect you to represent people. It's the role of the legislature there, Patty. All right, a couple more quick stories. We're coming up on 40 minutes. Black Lives Matter. The owner of a page on Facebook was collecting money for Black Lives Matter and using it for himself, $450,000. He's now been charged. A federal grand jury charged this guy with 3 counts of money laundering, 1 count of wire fraud, because he basically took people's money under false pretenses, and the tax-exempt status of their organization had been revoked. He never told Facebook that it was revoked, that he kept collecting money off of Facebook's donation system, people thinking that they're making tax-deductible donations to this organization, and he's just taking the money for himself. Seems legit, right? Yeah. If you don't know, Black Lives Matter is a Marxist organization. When their website was first published back in early 2020, they openly stated that, or maybe it was 2018 or 2019, they openly stated that they are a Marxist organization. Their leaders said they are, quote, trained Marxists, that they are for the dissolution of the nuclear family, that they're about equity, not equality. Equality of opportunity is one thing. Equity of outcome is very different. And most people conflate the two. They think equality and equity are the same thing. They are not. Equality of opportunity. You and I both get to start at the starting line and run the race together. That's equality of opportunity. Equity of outcome mandates that you and I both cross the finish line at the same time. That doesn't happen. And nor should it be mandated by the Constitution. This is a free country. You are free to run as fast or as slow as you want. And so am I. That's equality of opportunity. We all get a chance to go line up on the starting line. The outcome is up to us. The government should not be guaranteeing that. That is what a socialist Marxist worldview teaches. And that's what we're hearing now. In fact, the governor in California, this is my last story here, the governor of California, who's up for recall, Mr. Newsome, has said that, quote, we are not going back to normal after the pandemic because normal accepts inequality. Economic justice is the idea that the economy will be more successful if it is fairer. Meaning equity. The goal is to create opportunities for all to thrive. God, that's fine. And that prosperity and justice go hand in hand rather than in opposition to one another. Prosperity and justice depend on our individual efforts. If somebody sits back and eats Fritos and Cheetos and corn chips and potato chips all day long while playing video games, and they don't make a lot of money, they have only themselves to blame for it. But if somebody gets up and studies and learns and develops a skill and markets that skill and uses that skill, then they get a reward. They risk all that investment to try in the hopes that it'll make themselves better, and then they're going to get a reward. Equity of outcome and equality of opportunity are two very different things. And yet our governor is saying we're not going to go back to normal because normal accepts inequity. There's always going to be inequity. Let me quote Jesus one more time, and then I'll wrap up. Jesus said, "The poor you will always have with you." Think about that. The poor you will always have with you. It's what we do in treating the poor that makes a difference, how we deal with the poor. In other words, Jesus doesn't say that we're always going to have, that eventually everybody's going to have prosperity. Jesus doesn't say that eventually there'll be all the equity across the board. No, we're always going to have different levels based on what we do. Even in communist China, after the revolution in the 1940s, and all private property was taken, the state owned everything, and everybody had to produce, and there wasn't enough food to go around. And this one little town, 12 farmers came to the mayor and said, "Hey, let us produce our quota, and anything that we produce over and above the quota, we get to keep." And it was all hush hush. And the mayor said, okay. So they let him do it. Well, they produced more food over and above their quota than they had in the previous 10 years for quota in 1 year. The word of this eventually got out, by the way. And China eventually started morphing back to more of a capitalistic flavor in some of their work. That's actually turning around now, but the point is, just like in America, when America was founded, for the first 2 years, it was a socialist endeavor. Everybody was supposed to work, and everybody was supposed to share everything equally, and everybody was starving. So William Bradford turned things around and said, okay, y'all got private property now, y'all produce your own stuff. Well, lo and behold, the guy who was sitting around on his couch acting sick all the time suddenly got up and worked because he got to keep what he himself grew. He got to keep the fruit of his labors. That's the key. Equity of outcome is equity of despair, that everybody gets. It's the least common denominator. It's going to sink to the bottom. So we should not want this, yet we're seeing this in our society today. We're seeing people saying it's a good thing. They're trying to sell it to us. And as I opened up this segment, we are at war. And unless we fight back, it's going to be some problems. We're going to lose the country unless we step up and take back the ground that we've lost. I'll be writing more about that at Uncover DC this next week. We will catch you guys. I've tried to do 2 of these a week, but I'm only doing them one, but we'll see what happens. You can also track me on uncoverdc.com. You can read me on Red Stage. You can follow me on Facebook and Gab and MeWe using the new book of Daniel. If you're watching this on YouTube, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. But also know that I'm opening up a CloutHub account over at CloutHub. So you want to go over and register, get an account over there. Because as I said earlier, YouTube is censoring me. They've already taken down some of my podcasts. So my news today was what I call middleweight news. The hard-hitting, heavy, incisive news that I want to talk about, I'll be talking about on CloutHub, because that is a free speech platform where they're not going to take me down just for talking about truth. Unfortunately, we have these social media giants who think they know better than us about what is truth. So with that, I want to wish you a very happy St. Patrick's Day. Again, hope you're wearing some green, and we will catch you guys on the next New Book of Daniel podcast. This is Daniel Bobinski. I thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you on the next show. Until then, be blessed.